When there is a hazardous materials emergency, you should both A and B above. Prevent smoking and keep open flames away, and keep people away and warn them of danger. Which of the following must drivers have in their possession while transporting Class A or B explosives? The written route plan. Do not smoke within feet of a placarded cargo tank used for Class 3 flammable liquids or Division 2.1 gases. 25 feet. If the words inhalation hazard appeared on the shipping papers, you need placards designating a poison. If the hazardous materials are classified as forbidden, you should refuse the load. You must carry a gas mask with you when transporting chlorine. A placarded vehicle must have at least placards. 4 placards. Who is responsible for checking to be sure the shipper correctly named, labeled, and marked a hazardous materials shipment? Both A and B, the carrier and the driver. How many different hazard classes are there? 9. You cannot load some products together in the same cargo space. This is specified in which of the following tables? Segregation and separation chart. If you're hauling hazardous materials and have tires on your vehicle, you must stop and check them every time you park. Dual tires. A vehicle placarded for Division 1.1, 1.2, or 1.3 explosives may be left unattended in a safe haven. If you are required to stop at a railroad crossings, you must all of the above. Stop 15 to 50 feet before the nearest rail. Remember to never shift gears while crossing tracks, and proceed only when you are sure no train is coming. Some hazardous materials may not be loaded together with other hazardous materials. The prohibited combinations are listed in the segregation and separation chart. You must have placards for explosive, poison gas, or dangerous when weight exceeding any amount. The shipping papers for hazardous materials can be found any of the above locations: in a pouch on the driver's door, in a clear view within reach while driving, or on the driver's seat when out of the vehicle. Which of the following statements about loading and unloading cargo tanks is false? The person in attendance must be within 50 feet of the tanker. The floor linear for explosive may not contain any of the above. A transport index relates to products that are radioactive. Which of the following statements about radioactive labels is true? Yellow 3 indicates the highest level of radioactivity. When transporting both hazardous and non-hazardous materials, your bills must any one of the above. So describe the hazardous materials first, have the hazardous materials highlighted, or identify the materials by the letter X or RQ in the HM column. The designation RQ identifies the material's reportable quantity. You may use dangerous placards instead of separate placards for each table 2 hazard class when both A and B above, you have 1,001 pounds or more of 2 or more table 2 hazard classes requiring different placards, or you have not loaded 2,205 pounds or more of any table 2nd hazard class material at any one place. You must use a specific placard for this material. When transporting hazardous waste, you must all of the above. Have the word waste before the name of the material on the bill. Sign a uniform hazard waste manifest and carry a uniform hazard waste manifest in the truck. Tankers used to transport hazardous materials on vehicles must be marked with the UN or NA ID number of the product. Of the following hazardous material classes, which is the most dangerous? Division 6.1. You must control how far packages labeled radioactive 2 or radioactive 3 are located from people and cargo space walls by referring to the transport index and the separation distance table. Who was responsible for certifying on the bills of lading that the hazardous materials are prepared properly? The shipper. When transporting hazardous loads, you must check the tires at least every 2 hours or 100 miles. You must notify of any spills exceeding the RQ. Notify DOT and EPA. When transporting explosives, you may not park all of the above within 5 feet of the traveled part of the road, within 3,000 feet of a tunnel, and near an open fire. When transporting explosive flammable liquid or flammable gas, you may not use cargo heaters. A safe haven is defined as a government-approved place for parking vehicles loaded with explosives. In order to transport hazardous materials which require placards, all of the above, you must have a commercial driver's license, you must pass a written test on hazardous materials, and you must have the hazardous materials endorsement on your Cdl. The hazard class of all materials specifies the risk associated with the materials. When transporting compressed gases, you must secure the cylinders in boxes or racks, or brace them down flat. Containment rules are rules that all of the above instruct the driver in loading hazardous materials, instruct the driver in transporting hazardous materials, and instruct the driver in unloading bulk tanks hauling hazardous materials. You should turn off your engine when loading flammable liquid unless you need the engine to run the pump. How many identical placards is a vehicle hauling? Hazardous materials required to display and where? 4. 1 on the front, 1 on the back, and 1 on each side of the vehicle. Drivers who transport route controlled radioactive materials must carry a dated certificate or radioactive materials training. This training must have occurred within the last 2 years. Drivers of placarded vehicles transporting hazardous materials must stop 2 feet from the nearest rail of a railroad, 15 to 50 feet. What type of fire extinguisher is required in the power unit of a placarded vehicle? A UI rating of 10 BC or above. Who is responsible for packing, labeling, and preparing the hazardous materials shipping papers for a common carrier? The shipper. If hazardous material is spilling from your vehicle, do not move your vehicle any more than safety required. Animals and human foodstuff should not be loaded in the same vehicle with poisons. The transport index of a radioactive material tells the degree of control needed during transportation. The product ID markings on a tank must be black 4-inch numbers on orange panels. Which of the following is the proper definition of a cargo tank? A bulk container permanently attached to a vehicle. With most hazardous materials, you may park within 5 feet of the road briefly, if your work requires it. Now, the materials that are the exception and do not allow parking this close to the road are explosives A and B. Cylinders containing compressed gases may only be loaded onto a vehicle without a flat floor or platform if the cylinders are all of the above in boxes that will keep them from turning over, loaded into racks attached to the vehicle, and loaded in the upright or horizontal position. Which signals may be used to warn of a stopped vehicle that contains explosives? Reflective triangles. The basic description of a hazardous material includes the hazard class, the identification number, and the proper shipping name. Which one must appear first on the shipping paper? The identification number. A driver that hauls hazardous materials must attend training every 3 years. AW. The first column of the hazardous materials table means this material is only restricted when shipped by air and or water. Class A explosive must not be transported in a combination vehicle if the vehicle includes a placarded cargo tank. When a substance in the materials table is written in italics, it means it is not the proper shipping name. Only those in Roman type above it are proper shipping names. In column 1, the symbol I means international transportation. To find out if a shipment includes a hazardous material, you should look at the shipping papers. How many different hazard classes are there? 9. A placarded is required for a combustible liquid at 1,001 pounds or more. A hazard class, named or ID number may not be used to describe a non-hazardous material. Product ID numbers must appear on each side and both ends of a portable tank or other bulk packaging containing hazardous materials 1,000 gallons or more. When hauling hazardous materials with any dual tires, you must check the tires each time you stop. In column 1, the D symbol means domestic transportation. If there is an RQ before or after the item description on the shipping paper, it means the carrier must report any spill of this material. Which of the following choices is a hazard class you are not allowed to smoke around? All of the above: oxidizers, flamables, and explosives. You do not have a hazardous materials endorsement on your commercial driver license. When can you legally haul hazardous materials? Only when the vehicle does not require placards. On the hazardous materials table, proper shipping names are shown in plain type and in alphabetical order. Carriers must give each driver who transports Class A or B explosives a copy of FMCSR Part 397. The hazardous materials identification number is important because all of the above, the shipper must include it on the package. Police use the number to identify the material after an accident, and the shipper must include it on the shipping papers. In the event of an accident involving hazardous materials, you should first send someone for help and warn others of the danger. When hauling explosives 1.1 and 1.3, which placard do you use? Explosives 1.1. The basic shipment of a hazardous product must include the proper shipping name, hazard class, and identification number. The hazardous material will be named on either one of the above list, the hazardous materials table list, or the list of hazardous substances and reportable quantities. You should never transport a package labeled poison if you're hauling porous products. A segregation and separation chart indicate products that cannot be loaded together in the same trailer. The shipper must attach a diamond-shaped label to hazardous materials by any one of the above: putting a label on the package, putting a label on a tag attached to the product, and putting a label on the product. Which one of the following shipping descriptions is in the proper order? UN 1076, Phosgene 2.3. A placard on a trailer is intended to communicate the risk of hazardous materials. The placards should be placed on the vehicle before you drive it. Whenever your vehicle is placarded, do not drive near open fires unless you can safely pass the fire without stopping. Entries in the hazardous materials tables are shown in alphabetical order by proper shipping names. What is the shape and size of a placard? 10 3/4 inch square or diamond. A placard must be placed at least 3 inches away from any markings. Placarded loads require a fire extinguisher in your truck with a UL rating of 10 BC or more. In the materials class is listed the word forbidden. What kind of materials are you still allowed to haul? Both B and C. You can't haul a forbidden cargo and nothing. The hazardous waste manifest should be tabbed differently and kept on top of all other paperwork. If you are in an accident involving hazardous materials, you should keep all people far away and upwind of the accident. What placard must be used with an inhalation hazard load? Poison. A safe haven is one place you can leave a vehicle unattended that is hauling explosives. What is the best description of a safe haven? Any property that has been government approved for this use. When fueling a placarded vehicle, someone must always be at the nozzle controlling the fuel flow. You may not park a vehicle carrying hazardous materials within feet of an open fire. 300 feet. Which of the following is a way to decide which placards to use? All of the above: materials hazard class, amount of hazardous materials being shipped, and total weight of all classes of hazardous materials on your vehicle. When is it necessary to ground the trailer? When filling or uploading any flammable liquid tank, ground must be maintained until filling hole is properly closed. When a spill occurs of an RQ substance, the carrier has within to report the spill 30 days. Who is responsible for finding out what permits or special routes you will need to haul hazardous materials? The driver. You have loaded a hazardous material into a cargo tank. What must you do before you move the vehicle? Close all manholes and valves. Be sure they are free of leaks. A properly prepared Uniform Hazardous Waste Manifest must be signed and carried by anyone transporting a hazardous waste. One of these shipping papers descriptions for a hazardous materials is in the right order. Which one is it? Hydrogen, bromide, non-flammable gas, UN 1048. In column 1, the plus sign means the proper shipping name, whether the material meets the definition of the class or not. If an X or an RQ is in the HM column of a shipping paper entry, the shipment is regulated by hazardous material regulations. Which of the following, if required, must the shipper put on the package? All of the above: the required label, the hazardous material shipping name and identification number, the name and address of shipper or consignee. You are hauling hazardous materials and you find that one of your tires is leaking. You must stop at the nearest safe place and fix it. The transport index of a radioactive material tells the degree of control needed during transportation. Shipping papers must always be kept in one place when driving with hazardous materials. Where? When wearing your seatbelt. Both B and C within reach at all times, and in a pouch on the driver's door. A vehicle contains 500 pounds each of explosives 1.1 and 1.3. You must use explosives 1.1 placards. The shippers package hazardous materials. They must certify that this was done according to the regulations. The only exception is when the shipper is a private carrier carrying his or her own product. Who is responsible for certifying on the bills of lading that the hazardous materials are prepared properly? The shipper. Which of the following statements about radioactive labels is true? Yellow 3 indicates the highest possible level of radioactivity. If you must drive across a railroad crossing, you must never shift gears while crossing tracks. When transporting both hazardous and non-hazardous materials, your bills must identify the materials by the letter X or RQ in the HM column. When transporting explosives, you may not park within 300 feet of a tunnel. The hazard class of all materials specifies the risk associated with the materials. A placard cannot be placed closer than 3 inches from any other markings. On the hazardous materials table, column 1 shows to what shipping mode the information on that line applies. Special requirements of hazardous materials shipping papers include requiring drivers to keep papers either tapped or on top of other papers. A placard is required for a combustible liquid at 1,001 pounds or more. At what time is it required for the driver to have an approved gas mask on hand? Any vehicle carrying chlorine. There are 3 lists that drivers, shippers, and carriers use to find out if a material is regulated as hazardous. Which one of these choices is not one of those 3 lists? EPA Dangerous Materials List.